Okay. Okay, so great. So I think we can start. Thank you very much for being here. Today we have a seminar on impact investing in practice, insight from a leading DFI. And we have two speakers, Lars Ohler, who holds a PhD in innovation and development studies and 2 master's degrees in international business, political economy, and management from Copenhagen Business School, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the London School of Economics and Management. And currently, Lars is project and investment manager at DEG Impulse, and I think he will explain us what he's doing in these development finance institutions. But we are also very happy to have with us Chris Mara, and I would like to thank you very much, Lars, for inviting him. Chris Mara is connecting from Nairobi in Kenya, and Chris is an entrepreneur and a renewable energy promoter, and is the founder and CEO of Kiri EV, an electric mobility company based in Nairobi. So Kiri will share with us his experience as entrepreneur in e-mobility in Kenya. So I will not take much time, more time, and I give the floor to you, Lars, and thank you very much for joining us today. Please.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and good morning, everybody. Thanks a lot, Roberta, for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be part of your seminar series. And I would also repeat the thanks to Chris, who's joining us from Nairobi today, and will bring in his experience as a founder in the e-mobility sector. So as you already said, Roberta, the title of today's seminar is Impact Investing in Practice, Insights from a Leading DFI. That means I would like you to immerse into the world of a development finance institution. And before we start, you already presented us just very briefly. So I joined DEG, the German Development Bank, 2.5 years ago. Today, I'm a project and investment manager. And before that, I did a PhD at the intersection of innovation and development studies, which is also pretty much related to what most of you are currently studying in their master's or PhD, as far as I understand it. No worries, I'm not gonna tell a lot about my PhD, and I think you already had a seminar with Primož Konda, who presented his research on the EV sector in China, and we did a lot of similar research in the past together. Just one sentence on what I did. So I looked into the empirical case of latecomer firms in China's wind energy sector and tried to analyze what consequences technological change and the global decomposition of innovation have for the upgrading of innovation capabilities in late industrialized firms. Yes, and before doing my PhD, I worked in the startup and venture capital sector in Hamburg and Germany, which is also why I'm still very passionate about working with startups in our new Develop Ventures program that I will present later on. Yes, and having that said, I will briefly hand over to Chris. You can also say a few words about yourself, Chris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Lars, and thanks for inviting me to this. As mentioned earlier, my name is Chris Mara. I'm the founder of Kiri EV. We're an e-mobility startup based in Nairobi, Kenya, called working on 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers. We've been doing this for the last 3 years, and it has been a challenge getting this going, especially because there's been a belief that e-mobility cannot work in Africa. So we've had to really put our heads down, work on it, and show that it can. And we've had great support from Lars and his team at FW and DEG, who really believed in what we're doing and have supported us with some crowdfunding. So I look forward to giving you and sharing more about what we're doing and the challenges we're facing.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Chris. So very briefly on the agenda. So I will start by giving you a very short introduction into the world of development finance institutions in general, tell you what the mandate is and what we usually do. Then I will provide you with a concrete example of DEG, the German Development Bank, as Europe's largest DFI. Afterwards, I will briefly talk about the startup grant program Develop Ventures, which is one example for an instrument of a DFI. And afterwards, Chris will present Kiwi EV, the startup he founded and is heading. And we would like to take the second half of our seminar today. Instead of just talking for 1.5 hours, it's always nice to have a certain interaction. And would like you to also work in groups and have a very short presentation at the end. And at the very end of the seminar, we have a short Q&A session. However, if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to raise your virtual hand or write something in the chat, and then we will try to answer it along the presentation. Okay, so let's start with DFIs in general. So before I will tell you about DFIs, just a very short question, because I don't know what you already know, what kind of background knowledge you have on DFIs. So perhaps a few words or a bit of feedback. What do you think? What is a DFI, and what is the difference between a DFI and a commercial bank?
I don't know if somebody from home would like to answer, because I mean, from here it's a bit complicated because we have to come down, otherwise you will not.
Sure. Okay, then I think we only have one. How many do we have online? No, we have here.
Just
1, 2, 3, 4.
Five. I mean, 5 people, I suppose. Or if you want to come here, and you can just, I can, because otherwise you will not answer a bit, but you can answer, I can repeat your answer. So what's the difference between a development finance institution and a commercial bank? Still sleepy.
It's time for a coffee.
Yeah, time for a coffee, yes.
No worries, I will just go ahead. I hope it's going to be clearer once we present it. Okay, so first let's start with the mandate. What exactly is the mandate of the DFI? The mandate is, or in general, DFIs are specialized, usually government-owned development banks to promote economic development and sustainable growth in developing countries. How do we do that? Through favorable financial instruments and services. So the difference is, as you can see here, that DFIs are usually majority owned by states. That means they can get very easy money and cheap money and can therefore accept higher risks. That is also why DFIs can go to a lot of high-risk countries. I think in most countries where we operate as DEG, no European commercial bank would be able to enter these markets because of extremely high risks. At the same time, DFIs apply a very strict selection criteria. So we would not only go for any investment opportunity, but we have a very, very strict set, and we can only accept investments with a very positive impact. That also means at the same time that once we invest as a DFI, there's a certain quality seal with the goal to encourage further private sector mobilization. Exactly. So I will also present the instruments. We have different instruments that we can use to fulfill our mandate. So we have long-term loans. We can use equity capital. We can use guarantees, but also grants and technical assistance and advisory services. And as I said before, we have a very stringent investment criteria, which means we can only accept investments that have very high impact. Talking of impact, when I talk about impact, I refer to social, environmental, and economic impact in line with the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And for each investment, we plan we have to clearly quantify the impact we want to create. So that means that the aim is to generate sustainable development outcomes such as poverty reduction, job creation, increased access to essential services such as healthcare and education, improved infrastructure, and in general, environmental sustainability. That also means that we as a DFI, we have to really track the progress of these indicators over time and assess during and also at the end of each investment to what extent we really managed to generate the impact we wanted to create. And I said before that we want to create positive impact, so we also have to really be aware of any negative impact we can create. For instance, if we plan a huge hydro plant in, let's say, Kenya, we also have to mitigate any social risk involved in hydro projects. So that is in general what DFIs do. Perhaps it will be a bit more concrete when we talk about one specific example being DEG. DEG is the German Development Bank, as I said at the beginning. It's Europe's largest DFI. And I will talk very briefly about DEG in general, and then we will go over to a specific program. So DEG was founded in 1962. We are located in Cologne in Germany, have a bit more than 600 employees, and our shareholder is KfW. So we are part of the KfW banking group, which is based in Frankfurt, which is actually Germany's third largest bank after Deutsche Bank and DZ Bank. And KfW was formed in 1948 after the Second World War as part of the Marshall Plan. KfW is state-owned, which means it can, as I said before, we can raise funds at very advantageous conditions. So we can raise a lot cheaper capital than any commercial bank could do. We currently have a total portfolio of almost 10 billion euros. And perhaps I'm trying to get to the next slide. There you go. If you have a look at how our current portfolio is invested in terms of geographical split, you can see that we have almost an equal split between Asia with 3.1 billion euros, Africa with 2.7 billion, and Latin America with 2.7 billion. Our headquarters is in Cologne in Germany, but we also have 19 locations around the world. So we have larger offices, which are the representative offices in blue, that we have in Mexico City, Lima, Sao Paulo, Nairobi, Johannesburg, Istanbul, Beijing, and some more. And we have smaller satellite offices that we sometimes also share with colleagues from KfW and GIZ. Perhaps only one thing, you can see that, of course, the vast majority of our investments goes into developing countries, but we also still have a small portfolio in Europe with 1 billion that is mainly in the Balkan states. We don't operate alone as the German Development Bank, but we're embedded in a European network, which is called European Development Finance Institutions, shortly EDFIs. So in total, we have 15 different members of the EDFIs, and the headquarters of the EDFIs is based in Brussels. And since we have a lot of Italian students here today, I guess a lot of you have heard of CMEST, which is part of the Grupo CDP. Exactly. And why do we work together as EDFIs and not like as each DFI alone? It's very similar to the benefits of working as a European Union, but here only limited to the financial part. So if we work together as EDFIs, we can, of course, have much larger financial volumes. We can share risks. We can harmonize standards. And especially given the new technologies that usually require a lot of complex finance structures, it's quite important to have multiple partners on board. And the goal is that we come in as EDFIs, share risks, and also mobilize further investments by partners such as International Finance Corporation or regional development banks. I guess most of you have heard of the World Bank, which is, of course, the largest multilateral development bank. But you also have regional development banks, such as African Development Bank or Asian Development Bank. And I just compared CMEST and DET to show you the extent. And to be fair, I mean, CMEST is much younger. It was founded in 1991, so it's still relatively small. And it has a bit of a different focus. So the focus of CMEST in Italy is mainly to promote FDI by Italian companies. I think there's no investment without an Italian company involved. That explains also why the volumes are quite different, and also the different split in terms of region and sector. So the focus of CMEST is much less on sub-Saharan Africa, only 11%, whereas we have 21% in sub-Saharan Africa. CMEST focuses much more on Latin America and East Asia, which are, of course, less risky markets for Italian companies to invest in. And that's also similar in terms of sectors. So the vast majority of CMEST is with 73% in industry, promoting Italian manufacturing worldwide, while we have an almost equal split or a similar split between the financial sector, infrastructure, mainly in the power sector, but also quite a big chunk in industry. Yeah. Okay, so that was an example of a specific DFI or two at the end, comparing two different DFIs. And as I said, the focus of investments can be quite different in terms of geographies, in terms of sectors. But then I also presented at the beginning that we can use very different instruments as DFIs. So the core of us as DEG is that we really invest in large-scale projects, in infrastructure projects, such as, like, for instance, the Lake Turkana wind power project in Kenya, which is one of the largest wind farms in Africa. For that, we use long-term loans and equity, but we also have a smaller section at DEG that provides grants. Why do we provide grants? Because a lot of projects in the countries we operate in are high risk, and startups are already high risk in Europe, and they're certainly not lower risk in many African countries. Chris will talk about that shortly. So there's in a lot of cases no expectation on return on investment. That's why we also provide non-repayable grants that are especially for early stage startups important to overcome the valley of death and really raise more capital by other lenders and investors. So the Develop Ventures program was officially launched in 2021, and it emerged as a new stream from an already quite established and actually one of the largest grant programs in Germany. And contrary to loans and equity, we don't use our own capital and money for the projects, but we actually use taxpayers' money. So we use the money from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, short BMZ. And they set up a program in 1999 with the target group of small and medium-sized or larger companies in Europe, and also local companies that want to create a business with high impact. We sought to set up a new program 2 years ago that comes in at a much earlier stage. So not for mature companies, but for, as I said, early stage companies that are still at their pre-seed or seed phase and need grant money to test their business model on a larger scale. So our mission here of Develop Ventures, and I will go to the next slide, takes a bit. It's loading. The connection.
I don't know why it's not advancing.
As long as you can still hear me, it's all good.
Yeah, no, we can hear you, but the PowerPoint is not advancing. Maybe you can just stop.
No, it's advancing. Okay, it took a bit.
Okay, yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah. So our mission with Develop Ventures being a grant scheme is to find startups that combine on the one hand innovative business models with, on the other hand, positive and especially scalable impact in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And the process is that startups from Kenya, from Tanzania, and from Ghana at the moment can apply twice a year, followed by a shortlisting of 10 startups that are invited for a pitch session. And after the pitch session, we have a due diligence where we thoroughly screen the business models and the teams behind the different startups. And in the end, if the startups make it through the due diligence, like Chris, they receive a grant of 100,000 euros. And as I said before, this grant is non-repayable, which means it's free money. And this is especially important for early stage startups that would otherwise find no other financing in local markets. I hope the slides will work again. Yes. So we're often asked about the sectors and verticals we are specifically interested in. And as you can see, the very simple answer is that we are sector agnostic. We are very much open towards all kinds of sectors as long as the startups fulfill our criteria and generate positive impact. But at the same time, what you can see here is the clustering of our existing portfolio. At the moment, we have 33 investments, and the majority of our investments go into green tech with renewable energy, circular economy, and e-mobility. And you can also see the logo of Kiri EV here. Then we also have quite a big cluster in fintech, mainly startups in the digital lending, digital insurance, and digital wallet area. And the third largest scheme we have, or third largest vertical, is e-marketplaces, mainly in food, agriculture, and health. Especially given the very high inflation in markets like Kenya at the moment, it's quite important to provide new and innovative business models to, for instance, buy food in bulk. Like a lot of communities buy food together to save a lot of money on consumer goods. But we also have other investments in areas such as sustainable housing or data labeling. So we have quite a broad portfolio, and I think today we will zoom into the e-mobility sector to get to know more about the macroeconomic conditions, about the local challenges, and the experience as a founder in that environment by Chris. So without further ado, I will try to switch the slide. Taking a bit, but Chris, you can already, I have your slides here, so you don't have to open your presentation. And once we can see the slide, Chris can start.
Okay.
There you go.
Great morning, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. As Lars said, my name is Chris. So I'm founder of Kiri EV. So Kiri EV is, our aim is to lead the electric revolution across Africa. And we're a startup based in Nairobi, doing 2 and 3 years. Next slide. So if we look at 2 and 3 wheelers, the reason why we picked this particular market is if you look at 2-wheelers, motorcycles, they are widely used across Africa and used for a number of variety of uses. You know, so from last mile delivery in Lagos, passenger taxis, called border borders in Kampala, security patrols in Nairobi, corporate deliveries in Lusaka, personal mobility in Pretoria. You know, there are an estimated 22 million motorcycles across Africa, and this is growing at an annual rate of about 12% plus. Next slide. So why did we pick e-mobility? This sector to tackle? One, if you look at the average spend of a lot of the riders across the continent, about 45% of their revenues, their income, goes towards fuel and maintenance costs. So, things like changing the oil filters, air filters, keeping the bike running. By switching them to e-mobility, we can save that 45% and it can go back into their pockets. So this is like an extra boost in income. Second, there's motorcycles are per particulate matter the most polluting segment when compared to cars. So because we have so many motorcycles across Africa, this is one quick and easy way of targeting carbon emissions and reducing this across our cities. If you look at Africa, especially, we don't have regulations such as Euro 4 and Euro 5 when it comes to fuel regulations, how clean the petrol or diesel has to be. And we also import a lot of old vehicles. It means that the efficiency of engines and the emissions it produces are a lot higher. So you find that smog and carbon emissions are very high in African cities. So you have a lot of health and respiratory conditions, mostly because of emissions you get from motorcycles and other cars. So by switching this to electric, we have a huge impact both on the environment and on the bottom line of slide. So in terms of the problems and challenges we're facing in adoption of e-mobility, like I mentioned before, people didn't believe that e-mobility is going to work out. And one of the main issues is that there's a lack or perceived lack of power. Yes, there's some countries with very little power where the connectivity rate is below 20%. And then there are countries like Kenya where the connectivity rate for electricity is nearing 80%. So there's a wide range across the whole of Africa. But what does this do? It means, one, there's anxiety around, range anxiety. So typically, the longest distance you can get out of a full charge is about 70 kilometers, whereas a typical rider does about 105 kilometers per day. So there's about a 35 kilometer gap. So, there's a fear of, will I run out of juice before I get to my destination? That then brings up the fear of, where am I going to charge? So there's a shortage of charging infrastructure. And with that as well is coupled of how long it takes to charge. Because a lot of the bikes across Africa are mostly used for commercial purposes, they need to be moving 24/7. It's not like they're going to work, parking them, meeting a whole day, and then going back home. So because of that, they need shorter charging times, shorter and quicker charging times, so that they're able to earn their revenue. The other issue has been the high cost of, electric vehicles. And this is mostly because, one, it's a new technology. If you compare Teslas, when they first came out, they were, a luxury vehicle. But over the years, now the price of a Tesla is comparable to that of a normal family-selling car. The other issue has been lack of charging infrastructure and then limited EV options. So because it's still a new industry, there's not a wide variety of motorcycles that are electric. So this is limited and has made it, difficult for consumers to pick this limited choice. So where do we see the real opportunity is really turning petrol motorcycles into electric. And we believe this will continue being an opportunity because, one, fuel prices. And this was rising even before the crisis in Ukraine, before COVID, and especially places like here in Kenya and other countries like Nigeria, there's been a push to remove subsidies on petrol prices. So in the last 10 to 12 months, petrol prices in Kenya have gone from being about 0.8 of a dollar per liter to about $1.5 per liter. So the price has doubled in the last year alone. And this month, they're going up by another 10%. So we see this continuing over the next 5 or so years to make EVs more competitive. Furthermore, technology is keeping on improving in terms of battery technology, the range and the distance you're getting out of. Next slide. So what are we as Kiri doing to make this market viable? So the first thing we're doing, we've designed a vehicle, an electric bike that's specific for Africa. So when we started off, we got bikes off the shelf from China and India, and we came and tested them to just see how it works. This didn't work because the use of the vehicles was completely different. In other regions of the world, what you usually find that's very common is like the Vespa type vehicle that's used mostly for personal commuting. Roads are smooth in other jurisdictions, but here in Africa, you have a lot of rough roads. People carry 2-3 people on a motorcycle, carry goats, carry cows. So the heavy carrying capacity needed to be more robust. So now we've designed a vehicle that's good for here. The other thing we've done is look to manufacture it here, so we can bring the cost lower by doing a lot of the manufacturing here and the assembly here. This one creates more jobs and starts creating an ecosystem around the industry, the EV industry. To tackle the high upfront costs, we partnered with local MFIs, so banking institutions, asset financiers. And what they've done is they've come in and, you only have to pay a small deposit for the vehicle, and then you basically pay the loan off over the next 12 to 18 months, depending on how much deposit you put down. This has made it easier, so it's basically a pay-as-you-go model and you pay on a daily fee. This has made it very easy for people to be able to get the asset, use it, because like I said, most of them are used for commercial purposes. So they use it during the day, whatever money they make during the day, they pay a little bit off towards the loan, and then the rest towards their daily needs. And because we've reduced the cost of operating these bikes, it now means that they're actually left with more money in their pockets after the end of the day. We've also, because of the lack of charging infrastructure, we've also had to start building infrastructure. So what we've done as a company is, one, build our own charging system, like devices, and then we've partnered with other companies to franchise this. And we believe the franchising model is quicker to be able to spread, charging infrastructure widely across the country and across the continent, so that range anxiety is reduced. The other thing we've had to do is build up now the skills within the sector. So because it's a new technology, you find there's a lack of expertise or a shortage of expertise in terms of being able to fix batteries, being able to fix controllers, the technical part of it. So we really had to bring up a lot of training mechanics, training interns, to really bring the industry up to scratch and be able to, not having that our partners and our clients rely on us specifically. Those skills can be disseminated across the industry. Next slide. So our solution is a range of electric vehicles. So we have on the right, we have in the red, we have the vehicles that can be used for both personal and commercial purposes. Because we realize, as much as the personal mobility market is still small, it is growing. And the reason why it's growing is because in a lot of countries across Africa, you're starting to get limitation on imports. So a lot of our vehicles come from mostly Japan, and from the West, but as second-hand vehicles, usually depending on the country, anywhere between 5 to 12 years old. In Kenya, there's a ban on any cars older than 8 years, and they want to reduce this to 5 years. And what has happened is the cost of vehicles has gone up. One, because of the COVID and the global situation has meant that the cost of second-hand vehicles in the West and in Japan has gone up. So that has had a knock-on effect here in Africa, which has meant that because people want their own personal mobility, they're starting to look at buying brand new bikes. Two, the commercial segment is there and is strong, as bikes are used for, motorcycle taxis and for delivering last mile transport of goods. On the left-hand side, the ones in yellow is the commercial, say, delivery pickups and tuk-tuks for passengers. And then all of this has been tied down with the infrastructure where all our vehicles can use the same battery, the same underlying technology. This just makes it easier for people who are servicing them, and distributing the bikes becomes a lot easier. Next slide. So why 2 and 3 wheelers? This segment, one, is the segment where about 90% of vehicles are bought brand new. So if you look at across, cars, buses, motorcycles, Across Africa, motorcycles is a segment where 90% of the vehicles are bought brand new off the showroom. Whereas if you look at like, four-wheelers, your passenger vehicles and buses, they're mostly bought secondhand from Europe, and at a rate of about, I think it's about 10% of vehicles are bought brand new. So you can see that the great opportunities in two-wheelers. In this segment, because the price disparity between petrol, motorcycles, and EVs is much smaller, it's a segment that we believe will electrify a lot faster, a lot quicker than any other segment across the vehicle spectrum. Next slide. So what are the growth drivers, for e-mobility across Kenya and across Africa? One, like I've mentioned before, is the increasing cost of secondhand vehicles. Two, there's population growth, and what we've seen, especially in Kenya, the majority of population is elderly. So, because of a personal anecdote, I like to believe that because we watch a lot of Western movies, a lot of Indian movies, we see a lot of people riding on motorcycles, and it's kind of become a cool thing. So before, there was a fear of people taking up motorcycles as a personal mobility vehicle, but now that is changing. So with population growth, we continue to see this becoming a segment that will continue to grow. Two, because of the popularity of e-mobility, especially from big brands like Tesla, we're starting to see a wider acceptance of e-mobility. Yes, it does mean that there's going to be a slight change in behavior, but that is expected with any new technology. And as the infrastructure grows to support this sector, we do see a change in attitude towards vehicles, and acceptance of, it does save you costs, and it also does bring environmental benefits. So, we've started to see a lot of more startups in the sector trying to bring more vehicles to the market, so increasing variety, as well as starting to distribute and increase charging infrastructure. And in this, there's a split between, your sit and charge, and then battery swapping. So battery swapping is really making it a lot quicker and a lot easier and more convenient for people to just come to a swap in under 2 minutes and continue on their journey without having to worry about waiting for a long time to charge. The other thing that we've had to do, and as an industry that's been happening, is, availability of spare parts has been a key issue. This has started to change as more and more players come into the sector. There's been a consolidation in terms of the parts that are using and going into e-mobility bikes, vehicles. So there's more spare parts that are coming to the market, and they're also becoming cheaper and easier. And this is also a very key factor when it comes to the adoption of any technology. If the cost of maintaining and servicing that vehicle is high, then the adoption is going to be low, as people are going to be like, okay, it might be affordable to buy it, but if the long-term cost of maintaining and running that vehicle are high, then there's no point in buying it with other steam. Next slide, please. So what do we see as like the three areas that could really help push e-mobility to grow in Kenya and across? So one, there's been a regulatory push, especially from governments. So a lot of governments across the continent are starting to adopt and formulate e-mobility policies. And this is one because we are starting to see a realization that, this is a switch in the way things are done and the way things are built. So every time there's a change in, any industrial revolution, there's an opportunity for new players, new countries to come into the mix and establish themselves and establish these industries within. So because of also the bans that we're seeing, so if you look at across Europe, there's a lot of bans on ICE vehicles within the next 8 to 10 years. And what this means is for countries like Kenya, 8 years after the bans that come into effect in Europe will mean that we have to turn to e-mobility no matter what, because the vehicles we're importing are mostly coming from countries with bans. So the governments are taking initiative and starting to put policies into place that we can either leapfrog the transition into e-mobility or become key players within it. So this is things like increasing, the bans on electric vehicles, on ICE vehicles, creating subsidies and regulations. So here in Kenya, there's a special assembler's license. If you import e-mobility bikes as an assembler, you don't have to pay import duty and excise duty. So this is making it easier for us to, bring in these bikes and be competitive in terms of price. The other thing that we're seeing is a decline in costs. So as more and more companies, especially the bigger players in the global automotive sector, turn into e-mobility, the cost of lithium-ion batteries is coming down. Cost of production is coming down. So this and the technology in batteries improving year on year. So this is making e-mobility more affordable and more desirable in terms of we're able to get more distance out of the existing batteries. And the other thing we're seeing is a change of technology and a move towards more readiness in terms of the infrastructure. So what we've had to do as a company is really, bring up the quality of the vehicle to make sure that it's able to compete with the ICE vehicles and able to do what our clients wanted to do. So this has meant that we've had to put a lot of R&D into making sure that the vehicles are ready and that the infrastructure is ready. This, of course, takes a lot of capital and a lot of time because, unlike, let's say, an app where you can, write some code, test it for a week, and then, if that doesn't work, make a few more changes. With e-mobility and with hardware products, it takes a long time. We can build a battery today, but it'll take us at least 6 to 8 months for us to test whether it works or not. If it works, great. If it doesn't, that means we go back to the drawing board and it's another 6 months. But a lot of companies have been testing for the last three to 4 years, and we can now see that the technology is starting to come into readiness and fruition within the African. Next slide. So what have the challenges that we have faced over the last 3 to 4 years of setting up this e-mobility company? So one has been regulations. So we've had to really push the government to come up with regulations that support the industry. And this has had to be in collaboration with all industry stakeholders. So it hasn't been just EV companies alone. We've roped in solar companies, we've roped in the big assemblers. We had to rope in environmental sectors because all of these are tied, and we needed this push. This has been an issue because a lot of governments in Africa, across Africa, are struggling to raise revenues from taxes. So pushing for things like tax exemptions and import duty exemptions has been difficult, especially when with cashed-out governments. But with the realization that this could create a lot of jobs going forward and also reduce our import bills in terms of fossil fuels. So if you look at Kenya, about 60% of our foreign exchange reserves go towards buying petrol. This is a huge chunk, and the government realizes that by turning to e-mobility, especially in a country like Kenya, where 80% of our electricity is generated from renewable resources, means that we can save a huge chunk of our money that we generate internally going out from forex. Another issue has been supply chain. This was especially exacerbated during the COVID period when a lot of factories across the world were shutting down, were not running at full capacity. Shipping lanes were also not operating. So one thing that has happened over the last couple of years, we've noticed a huge change of shipping supplies, shippers. A lot of shippers have stopped serving the African routes or have started serving them with smaller vessels. This has meant that the cost of shipping has increased, and this was mostly as a result of a downturn in volumes during COVID. We're hoping this will turn around over the next couple of years as volumes pick up, but this has really been a huge issue. A lot of the players within the African market ship from India and China. Because of the factory closures, limited number of working days, this has also meant that supply has been irregular and unpredictable. Another issue has been technology readiness and infrastructure readiness. So, because of what we were doing here in Africa, the vehicles had to be fit for purpose. So we had to spend a lot of time bringing the vehicles up to scratch, and making sure that, when we put out a bike out there, if someone decides to carry 3-4 people or the entire family on the bike, it can do that. There are laws saying that you can't carry more than 3 people on a bike, but those are not, well enforced. So it means that we have to build our bikes not according to government regulation, which of course we do follow, but we have to make sure we build our bikes according to what our riders and our users and our clients are using them for. So which has meant a higher burden of, readiness has been placed on us to make sure that the goods are up to scratch. The other issue has been funding. Like I said, this is a high-risk sector. One, we're a startup. It's a high-risk sector because, there was a lack of belief that e-mobility can work in Africa because of, electricity, road conditions, and so forth. And also just, whether the general population can afford motorcycles, e-mobility. So this has been, because of that, there has been a shortage of funding coming into this. We are starting to see this change as companies have, really worked on proving that the products work. And this plug, this sector, this funding gap has also been plugged largely, like Lars has said, by grant funding, and a lot of money from generous European governments that has really helped this sector start to take shape. And it's not just across the e-mobility sector; it has been across the solar sector. It's been across fintech, last mile delivery of FMCGs. So, a lot of this funding has really helped prove that the market is there, and that now, as commercial readiness has come, that larger funds and commercial capital now coming to the sector. Another issue we faced is, because this is a new sector, is finding qualified staff or staff with experience in e-mobility. This has meant that internally we've had to train a lot of people to bring them up to scratch and understand e-mobility. And the other thing that we've had to do is also, look at sectors where there's similar skill sets. So a lot of this has meant looking at the solar sector and bringing people into that from the solar sector into e-mobility, and then, training up the difference in the gaps. The other final issue we face is market readiness. So we can build a great product, but is a market ready for e-mobility? We've seen this as, initially there's a big question mark over that. But over the last 2-3 years, this has now changed into a yes, the market does want e-mobility, and it is ready right now. And the factors that are driving this is mostly, one, the increase in fuel prices, which has meant that in terms of cost parity or in terms of operations, we're now a lot cheaper and a lot easier to operate running on e-mobility. And also because of increase in scale of the companies operating in the sector, we have seen that the cost parity between ICE and EV motorcycles has come much closer. So right now we're looking at a difference of typically around 15 to 20%, which will be made back within 6 to 8 months of operations. And then, next slide. Yeah, and that's pretty much it in terms of what we're looking at and the challenge we've been facing. Like I said, without the help of KfW and DEG, it would have been very difficult to prove that the market is ready for this. But now we're at a position where we feel we're ready for commercial scale up, and the market is ready to adopt this.
Thank you so much, Chris. I've seen these slides before, but I find them super interesting each time you talk about them. And I think you're also one of the front runners, also in terms of, you said, regulations is one of the main challenges, and also really forming a global ecosystem and putting some pressure on the government. Perhaps you can say a few words how you organize yourself as like young founders in the e-mobility sector and also try to exchange your ideas with the government. I think that would be quite interesting.
Yeah, so so in this sector, so what happened is initially, so within the Kenyan, specifically Kenya, so there is a organization that specifically for motorcycle assemblers and motorcycle dealers that deals with government. But we quickly realized that one, it's a lot of established companies, so companies like Honda, Toyota, Bajaj, TVS, and they had their own vested interest. One, they didn't want e-mobility to take up as quickly as it is right now, because it means, they've already put a lot of investments within their ICE production lines. So for them, they want to recoup their money first before they do the conversion or the transition to EV. Two, a lot of the EV players were young people, under the age of 30, 35 and younger. So a lot of us were green, didn't have a lot of experience with dealing with government. And, this was a whole new space. So, once we realized that there were a lot of vested interests, we decided to form our own association of e-mobility companies. And within this, we now leveraged some of so there's what's called the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. We became members of that. And we also became members of the Motorcycle Association of Kenya. And we use these platforms to now push our own agenda, write our own policies that we wanted to front towards the government and be able to tackle these new changes. One of the things we realized, of course, being young, thinking that, we're going to come and bulldoze our way and change the world. We realized government is very slow, takes its time, needs like 1 million meetings before they make one decision. So if you want a special e-mobility regulation or law, it would just take ages. So we decided the best way to tackle this is take what's already there. So take a law like, let's say, for what's already existing for the petrol motorcycles, and just make a small few adjustments so that rather than making a whole new law, it's an amendment to an existing law that now accommodates EVs. That way we're able to enjoy some of the tax incentives and tax breaks that the ICE vehicles were getting without having to go through a whole parliamentary process, which would take at least a year or two to get into place. The other thing we adopted, because to get tax incentives on batteries for EVs, is we adopted the regulations from the solar sector, which already has 10% tax on batteries. So basically just a copy and paste. This has now helped the sector move a lot faster, get a bit more recognition. And that way you're not, one thing we were told by one of the ministers in government is government doesn't like giving tax breaks, especially African governments. What they can do is work within existing regulations and make amendments to accommodate new sectors. And that's what we've been doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chris. So I think we still have a bit of time left. So we thought it would be very nice for you. You've heard a lot about the current situation, the current challenges generally startups face in developing countries, but also specifically in the e-mobility sector in Kenya. So I think it would be great if you could form small groups, especially those in the lecture room. For those being online, perhaps it's easier to have individual work. And just think for the next 15 minutes about the general challenges, the specific challenges in the e-mobility startup sector, and also what measures are important to overcome these challenges.
Okay,
Yes.
so and then you think they can show the student can show the slide. So we can collect some slide here, and we can share with you, and maybe the students who are online can do the same. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So
Is there any questions on that?
Yeah. Maybe questions also online. If you do have questions, you can just open your microphone and ask question. Do you have any question? Everything is clear what you have to do? Yes, please.
Yes, Chris is for Chris. Do you for some sense?
No, però magari lo ripeto, o gli passo il microfono. Just a second. I'm coming. Let's see. No, maybe. What? Occhio. Sì, però. Va bene. Era meglio stendere. Ah, quello è lunghissimo. Aspetta, te lo tirare? No, non è questo. No, questo è finito. È finito. Sì. Just a second, where is the question? It's complicated because the students actually. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yes. So where is the question?
Hi, thank you for your presence. I have a question to Chris. And I would like to ask if, do you think your final product could be faced by, in terms of money for sure, by the biggest part of the African community, or is just one?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
I think the audio was a bit bad. Perhaps you can just repeat it.
Sorry?
Could you repeat it? I think we didn't really understand the question because of the audio.
Ah, okay. Try again. Can you hear? Just try.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you think your final product could be faced in terms of money by the biggest part of the African community, or just one?
Yeah. So the question is if the product is going to be for the market in general, or it's kind of you see these these motorbikes as a kind of more niche product, no?
Yeah. So the first market, or the market that we think is going to really adopt first, is the B2B segment. So people doing deliveries, so commercial deliveries for. So what happens a lot in Kenya, a lot of the bikes are used for courier services, delivering like sodas and biscuits to like small kiosks on the roadside. So that's the first segment that will adopt this. So companies like Coca-Cola use a lot of these to just deliver, because they're not delivering to a supermarket that needs a whole truckload of boxes of soda. You just need a small supermarket that maybe wants 2-3 boxes. So these are used a lot. Once that market adopts, the really commercial market, the next market is the motorcycle taxis. So that's the biggest segment across most of Africa. People use those to get from home to work, from home to the stage to catch the bus. That's a really big segment. And that's mostly because like from the stage where the buses drop you off into the houses, maybe like a 1-2 kilometer walk. So people just prefer to jump on a bike because it's cheaper. And then the third segment, the personal mobility one. So, commuters taking the bikes to work. That is going to take a little bit of time and will take a lot of factors coming into place. And those factors being, one, the continued cost of vehicles. So, right now, take a small family car, let's say a Fiat last year was around, secondhand was about $5,000. Now it's about $1,000. That's actually about $12,000. So the price has more than doubled. So because of that, we're seeing a lot of people opting to buy motorcycles. This will take a long time because also the roads in most of Africa, we don't have like sidewalks or safe paths for riding. But a lot of governments now being pushed to do that. So that's something we see will happen in the next couple of years.
Can I also ask a question, because maybe at the end we will not have time. I mean, my question is in relation with your decision to also do the manufacturing side of the business, so do the assembly of imported component. So, I mean, why wouldn't be, because of course this is requiring a lot of capital and more capital than, for instance, investing only on the building up the infrastructure. And so I was wondering, I mean, do you think that you really need to build to produce and you cannot import? I mean, I'm thinking about China, where there are so many different kind of e-motorcycles, no? And some of them also very cheap. So why your decision of entering also in the manufacturing side of a business?
Yeah, so there's two reasons why we've done this. One, the first reason is government regulation. So the government has a very high ad valorem tax on fully built imported vehicles. So there's an incentive for local assembly. So right now, if you import a fully built motorcycle with a plan of distributing and selling it, the taxes amount to about 40% of the value of the vehicle. Whereas if you import it as an assembler, the tax is about 16%. So it's a huge difference. Two, if you look at the manufacturing of or the components for an electric motorcycle versus a petrol motorcycle, all the components in a electric motorcycle is about 100 components versus 1,000 plus when it comes to petrol ones. So because of that, the manufacturing has become simple. This is, we feel, is an opportunity to transition. The other thing we've seen with China is right now they are the factory of the world, but geopolitics is making this change. And also to create jobs here locally, we would need to transition.
Yeah, very good points. Okay, so I think you can start to work. Maybe you can just move around a little bit to organize yourself in groups. I don't know. Maybe you can create a and the same will be for the student. I mean, I don't know if the students who are at home, they would like to work together. I can try to use the breakout rooms, which I don't know where they are in this new version of. Do you? I mean, the students who are at home, would you like to work separately?
I don't know. For me, it would be good also to work together.
You won't want to? Yes, I would like to put you in a. I don't know where is it for with this new version of Zoom. I don't know where is.
We only use Teams. I can't help you on Zoom.
Sorry?
We use mainly Teams, so I don't know how it works in Zoom.
No, I mean, but usually was very. I mean, in the past was very easy because there was a command, but now I don't find it anymore. Because of course I've been doing. Luckily, I've been doing. Okay, the students. Okay, but altro, where is altro? Sorry, dov'è altro? Okay, just I think I'm finding. Okay, so if you don't mind, I will create this section. So it means that you will also be put probably in a separate section. But I mean, in the meantime, you can go for a coffee. And so we reconvene in, now is 10 minutes or what?
Let's make it 10 minutes until
10 minutes, so
10:30.
10:30, okay. So I will try to do this assegna. Okay, just a second. Okay. Just a second, I'm trying to do this. Okay, so I'm putting this, I mean, all the students in the same room, okay, who are online. Okay. No, sorry. I know, I think it's, are you in the section? No, apri. Okay. Okay, should be fine now, no? So the students are, okay, yes. Okay, good. And you and Lars and Chris, you can go for a coffee if you want.
Okay, see you in 10 minutes.
Okay, I think it works. It should work. Okay, good. Okay.